Which of these faces looks more manly? Almost every single one of you instinctively picked the one on the right, and yet very few of you consciously realized the 10 specific differences that led you to making this decision. We all know some people look manly and others don't. You can all tell, without a moment's thought, whether someone has a masculine face just by glancing at them, and yet outside of academia, very few people can describe what specific facial traits their brains are actually picking up on. Facial masculinity is one of those things that everyone can immediately recognize, but few can explain. Today, we'll review the facial aesthetics literature and share 10 features that actually determine whether a face is masculine and give you some tips on how to look better as a man along the way. First up are eyebrows. Faces with thicker, darker, lower, straighter brows, and straighter, in this case meaning brows with less of an arch, are perceived as more masculine. Mogliski and Welling found that this also happens to be an attractive trait, so if you want to improve this area, you can use topical minoxidil for density, tinted brow gel or brow tint for darkness, mild reshaping for straightness, and you can practice relaxing your frontalis muscle so your brows sit slightly lower. Second, craniofacial and cervical muscularity. Men with more muscular jaws and temples and men with thicker necks are perceived as more masculine. For instance, Brown and Tracy found that portraits of men with larger sternocleidomastoid muscles were perceived as better fighters. And you can see what a huge difference this would make, where neck muscles alone can be the difference between a nerd face and a jock face. And it's not even technically your face. And this too is an attractive trait up to a point. Our guideline here is if your neck is less wide than your jaw, a neck strengthening routine is worth it. It'll make you look more masculine and more attractive. If your jaw and neck are about the same width, further neck development will make you look more manly, but it probably won't boost your aesthetics. Now with facial muscularity, it's trickier. You've probably seen those ads for various jaw trainers and wonder if they actually work. Well, it's true you can grow your facial muscles, and it's not like these muscles are immune to hypertrophy, but the problem is that growing them doesn't always increase attractiveness. It can change your face shape for the worse, and you have to be really wary of temporomandibular disorders caused by excess joint strain. Third is the facial width to height ratio. In some studies, men are found to have a slightly larger facial width to height ratio than women of 1.98 versus 1.93 in Kramer's sample, and this may be why men with shorter, wider faces are perceived as more masculine. However, while this is a manly trait, it's not usually an attractive one. Genial and colleagues' meta-analysis concluded that men with this trait are considered more masculine but less attractive. If you have a very wide face, weight loss is the first-line solution, as this will make your face narrower but not shorter. In extreme cases, if you want to mask it further, you can use a trick most women already use for this, which is growing out your hair, and this hides the outer fifths of the face, giving the illusion of narrowness. It can also tone down excess masculinity, as longer hair is considered more feminine. We usually don't recommend this intervention, but for extremely wide, hypermasculine faces, it can be a good look. Fourth, robusticity. Sharp cheekbones, a protruding brow ridge, flanged ligonia, these traits all contribute to a face's manliness. However, this only increases your attractiveness up to a point. Like if you look at a young Jordan Barrett, he had remarkable robusticity to begin with. He looked both very handsome and structurally masculine. As he got older, however, he visibly augmented this feature, and while this may have helped him with some modeling projects, I think most neutral observers would agree that he would be considered more conventionally attractive when he was actually less robust. Fifth are the eyes. Men with narrower, closer together, and smaller eyes are generally perceived as more masculine. This is another one of those things where balance matters. Elias Deput has some of the most masculine eyes in the world, where they're extremely vertically narrow and rather close together, but while this looks quite cool, his gaze is almost overpowering. On the other end, if your eyes are genuinely too wide open to a degree that looks feminine, oftentimes it's a postural issue. You hold your eyes open excessively wide. This can be partially corrected by holding a bit of light, resting tension in the lower lid. But of course, you wouldn't want to be squinting all the time. Sixth are lips. Thinner lips, especially a thinner upper lip, is key for a masculine look, but it's actually an unattractive trait on most faces. Penna and colleagues' photomorphometric analysis suggests that a high upper vermilion height to chin to nose distance ratio, that is, a full upper lip, is attractive in men as well as women. While we would generally not recommend lip filler for men, if it's noticeable, the social backlash just makes it too risky as a tool. Some have speculated lip filler was a part of Matt Rife's glow up. though we don't necessarily think that's true. Similarly, 7th, men with rougher, coarser, ruddier skin are generally perceived as more manly, though, again, this isn't usually considered an attractive feature. 8th is facial adiposity. A leaner look generally is perceived as more masculine. You can see how UFC fighter Paddy Pimblett fluctuates between having a rather boyish facial aesthetic between fights to having a highly masculine facial structure by the time he's in the cage. Yes, the weight loss makes his face narrower, but it also lets you see that his structure is pretty robust and his craniofacial and craniocervical musculature is also highly developed. And while you don't want to look like you're about to step on the scales, a leaner look is more attractive on the vast majority of male faces. Now, let's look at the side profile. From the side, brows, craniofacial and craniocervical muscularity, robusticity all still have a huge impact. Lips have a smaller impact, facial width to height ratio is imperceptible, but now we can see two masculine features that didn't have that much of an impact before. A ninth trait is nose projection. Larger, more protruding noses are generally perceived as more masculine. This is one of the reasons rhinoplasty often backfires for men, even when executed perfectly. It robs the power from their side profile. And 10th, foreheads that slope backwards more are perceived as more masculine. While women's skulls are quite upright, sloping back 5.9 degrees on average, men's skulls generally slope back much further at 9.8 degrees, and so individuals with more slanted foreheads are perceived as more masculine, and those with more upright foreheads are seen as more feminine. This is arguably the most underrated component of facial masculinity, where most people don't even know it's actually a factor. And yet Spiegel found that this is one of the most important features that people unconsciously use when trying to determine if someone is a man or a woman. Now, to be clear, you don't need all of these traits to look manly. King 6'8", for instance, is facially masculine looking despite thin, arched brows and a full upper lip, as he has robust facial structure and muscularity. In fact, it's hard to find examples of famous men who fulfill all 10 of these features because in order to be famous, you typically have to be handsome. And being too facially masculine can make it difficult to look good, as it looks a bit orcish. Even the most masculine-faced male models generally have some femininity that balances their look out. That said, there's been some famous faces that tick nearly all of the boxes and still look quite good, such as Javier Bardem. Now, while most people discuss curves in the context of our glow-up advice, and that is the main service of what we do in part of our facial analysis, we also measure facial masculinity, femininity, both trait by trait and holistically. When you submit your photos, we perform over 100 aesthetic tests, and as part of that testing, we'll tell you how masculine or feminine your face is. And if a client says that they would like to look more masculine during the sign-up process, we incorporate facial masculinization into the Glow Up protocol. If you'd like to join the waitlist to receive the service, then click the link in the description and head over to Koovz.com.